Good morning. We just heard an extraordinary presentation from Gabriel Byrne. I'm Tom Stewart, and I have the honor of presenting and moderating a panel that will discuss some of the issues of the future of business. What we heard was about three extraordinary developments in the world of bits, in the world of technology. We heard about mobility, which will quadruple the number of people who have access to the internet, is quadrupling it as we speak. We heard about the cloud, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 16% and hockey sticking. We heard about what SAP calls in-memory computing and how it's going to drive quantum leaps in processing speed. But let's think also of the world of atoms. And before I bring our panel out, I want to just point out four megatrends in the world of atoms that will intersect with this world of bits. Think about the new demographics, for example. Thinking about the aging populations in the West and in Japan and now in China, and contrast that with the growing populations and the growing working age populations in India, Brazil, and various other countries. Enormous effects are going to spring from this demographic change. The Arab Spring is not a mere random event. It is also driven by the demographic phenomenon. Think about the fact that what we used to call developing and now call emerging economies will soon be fully fledged and emerge. At Booz & Company, we've calculated that only 52% of the 2,500 largest public companies in the world are now domiciled in the US and the OECD. Think about inclusiveness. If you look at the world's college-age population, college graduate population, only 17% are white and male. And think about issues of sustainability, not just about carbon and climate change, important as those are, but also generally about the issues of the company's relationship to society. We have an extraordinary group of four people here to discuss the future of business, and I'd like to invite them out onto the stage now. If you will, I'm not sure where they're going to come from. But Micho Kaku, who's known to many of you, one of the best known faces in science, the co-founder of string field theory in 1974, currently involved in defining the theory of everything. He's a best-selling author, TV and radio host, whose latest book, The Physics of the Future, is a provocative exploration, do sit down, is a provocative exploration of what the next 100 years will look like. We're not going to go to that full time horizon, but we'll get out there. Next to him, Michael Schrage is a research fellow at the MIT Sloan School Center for Digital Business, a thought leader in the world of innovation, a regular contributor to Fortune, CIO Magazine, Harvard Business Review, Strategy and Business Magazine, the author of two critically acclaimed books, Serious Play, How the World's Best Companies Stimulate to Innovate, and Shared Minds on the New Technologies of Collaboration. Next to him, Isabel Aguilera is one of only two women to have ever been chosen as one of Fortune's top 50 most influential executives in the world. Formerly the chief executive in the Iberian Peninsula for Dell, Google, and General Electric, she's left megacorporations to start a startup called TwinDocs, a cloud-based service for protecting confidential information in the cloud. And finally, last but certainly not least, on my left, your right, Peter Diamandis is the chairman and CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which leads the world in designing large incentive prizes to drive radical breakthroughs for the benefit of humanity. You know of some of the X Prizes he's funded, the $10 billion X Prize for private spacecraft and for 100-mile-an-hour per gallon equivalent cars. Now launching new prizes in exploration, life sciences, education, and energy. So this is our panel. Our topic is the large topic, the future of business. And what I want to do is just begin by asking, I'm going to begin by asking Micho if he would take a look at science and the increasing capabilities of machines. And if you think about business as a sort of a balancing act between what people can do and what machines can do, what are we going to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years that in machine capability that is going to blow our minds and change the way business is done?
Well, we've just had a very successful space shuttle launch. Congratulations to the people at Kennedy Space Center. However, your cell phone today has more computer power than all of NASA in 1969 when they put 2 men on the moon. But when I see these old videotapes of the NASA computers of 1969, 64 kilobyte computers, I say to myself, I wouldn't get into one of those space capsules given the computer technology back then. Well, that's Moore's Law. Computer power doubles every 18 months. And it means that even the nature of capitalism itself is beginning to change into something that I call perfect capitalism. When you go into a store today, you're surrounded by products, but you don't know the exact price and value of these products. In the future, the internet will be in your eyeglasses, and beyond that, in your contact lens. When you blink, you will see all the products arrayed with all the prices. You will know exactly what things really cost. That's perfect capitalism. These glasses, by the way, and contact lenses will also identify people's faces. You will always know who are you talking to. So at a cocktail party, you'll know exactly who to suck up to at any cocktail party. And the first people to buy these internet contact lenses will be college students studying for final examinations. They will blink and go online. Now, if you're a producer, on the other hand, you realize that brand loyalty is going to be put to the test. When people can see all prices inside their contact lens, it means that brand loyalty is going to be very, very important. You have to establish your brand, or else the consumer will instantly go to another product. But there's even another transition taking place, and that's a transition from commodity capitalism to intellectual capitalism. Tony Blair liked to say that England derives more revenue from rock and roll than it does the coal mining industry. That's because commodity prices like food have been dropping for 150 years. This morning, you had breakfast that the King of England could not have had 100 years ago. That's how cheap food is today because of mass production, better containerization. But the mind, you cannot mass produce the mind. And that's why intellectual capital is going to be more and more important for the economy. That means creativity, movies, artwork, software. That means the ability to produce creative, innovative, imaginative new products will be increasingly important in the new economy. And again, this is so profound. It's even changing the way the English language is spoken. When chips go into toys, for example, toys become intelligent, it's creating a problem for the English language, a contradiction in terms called smart Barbie dolls. Another contradiction in terms is Microsoft works. That is also a contradiction in terms. Now, I have ultimate respect for Microsoft. The point is that this revolution is thoroughgoing and profound, and it means that business has to keep up with these changes. It means that you have to have brand loyalty. It means you have to be in a different competitive environment where products change all the time with the speed of Moore's Law. And remember also that in 10 years' time, Moore's Law begins to slow down. And so we have to adjust again. Silicon Valley could become a rust belt in 10 years' time unless science can create a post-Silicon era.
So this leads me to a question that I want to throw to you, Peter, and see what you have. One of the things we've seen with Moore's Law is that information processing becomes essentially free. Is there something else that might become essentially free? I mean, could energy become essentially free, for example? Or is there something else that is essentially free now that might become extraordinarily expensive? People talk about water being the new oil, for example, and think that water might get very expensive. As you look across, Peter, at these inputs, some of them physical and some of them informational, do you see any dramatic changes in pricing on something that we all rely on?
So ultimately, there's a few different things going on. First of all, at no time ever before has power been in the hands of single individuals and small groups like we have it today. It's only going to become more and more empowered, literally where small groups can do what only governments or large corporations could do in the past. We're going to start to see what I call an age of abundance coming online, where we spoke about the king of any nation having nowhere near the kind of capability we have today. So if you think about the underpinnings of Moore's Law, giving us ultimately distributed health, education. I think if you think about energy production, you can look at what's going on to pick up on that. We're living in a time where the cost of solar energy is dropping at 30% per year.
The cost of solar is dropping 30%. Still higher than
we're still not at a point of grid parity, but you've got a reduction of solar, you've got an exponential increase in solar production. If you stop and you realize that the Earth, in 1 hour, more energy hits the Earth than we consume as a species during the entire year. 6,000 times more energy flux hits the Earth's surface. if we start to convert that, what's interesting is that the doubling time on solar, at some point 20 years out, even though people don't believe it, we don't think exponentially, we think linearly, we're going to reach a point where the cost of solar is far less than the grid parity of coal. And then a couple years later, all of a sudden, we end up with twice as much energy than we use on Earth, and then 4 times and 8 times. So what does the world look like when we have abundant energy? And we talk about water wars. Well, the fact of the matter is we have plenty of water on this planet. It just happens to be 97.3% salt water. If we can convert that to fresh water, we'll start all to have around this planet. That starts hitting health, and all of a sudden we are starting to live into an age of abundance where we've got all of us on this planet, energy, water, food, health, education. And that really begins to change the world. What happens when 1 billion new minds come online? What do they want? What are they going to produce? What are they going to consume? We're living at a point of rapid change in which billion-dollar companies are going to fold overnight and billion-dollar companies are going to come out of no place. It's dramatic.
So, Isabel, react to this. What we've heard are 2 sort of utopian visions. Right now, it seems like we've got a valley of the shadow of death to walk through before we get to, or a Sinai desert to go through before we get to whatever that promised land is. Pick your metaphor. What do you see as the big bumps that we might have on the road to this world of infinite choice of products, infinite food, infinite energy, this world of abundance? A, do you think this is realistic, or is it, to use scientific languages, nonsense? Or if you think we actually can get there, what are the big bumps? Michael, both of you, but Isabel start.
Well, I think that the massive use of technology somehow, because it's what both have been predicting, will give us the knowledge of using that model to predict other unknown hidden knowledge, like how the people react as a group, how we can predict or how can we expand the knowledge of our brains, because it's all related to networks and use of massive technologies. So we will be able to reach and to expand the knowledge of these unknown things, thanks to the expertise that we reach with the massive use of other technologies in other aspects of our lives. And that will be even a first step to further knowledge, because as soon as we develop the knowledge of our brain, that so far is used about 5 or 10%, just imagine how we can bump all this access to better technology, better energy, cheaper access to food or to education, to health.
So what I hear you saying, people like to say that one of your former employers, Google, I don't need to think, it's all in Google, Google is God, Google knows everything, and so on and so forth. But what you're also saying is we have the opportunity for what you might call an inner Google. If we could actually harness the network effects of the neurons that we already have. And you think technology will actually get us there rather than, as some people say, dumb us down, because I no longer have to memorize anything because I can look it up.
What I think is that there are similarities in the use of massive goods and the way other connections react. And we will apply that knowledge to prevent diseases. We will use that knowledge to expand and speed up education, what is really important.
Michael, what do you think?
Well, I now feel like I've been compelled and herded into being a contrarian of this.
Don't do it.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a contrarian without being a pessimist, because I'm very optimistic about what's going on, in no small part to network effects and the enabling influences of technology and the innovations of technology. That said, I think one of the best ways to take the future seriously is to take the past seriously. And my knowledge of the history of technology is such that I recall the phrase in the 1950s about energy being too cheap to meter. That was nuclear energy. The people in Japan don't think that's very funny right now. So I think that when one looks at the past, there are certain important things that can inform how we invest as a business in the future. Never confuse a clear view with a short distance. The issue here is not going to be, are we going to hit an age of abundance, or are there going to be the ability to harness network effects or intraocular embedded smart retinal implants? I think the issue is, what kind of market mechanisms, what kind of regulations influence, encourage, and distort the way these things become opportunities. And I think one of the genius things about Google is that they've created something that appears to be free, but what is in fact their biggest innovation is not their algorithms, but the ability to creatively cross-subsidize their business. The changing infrastructure of the cloud transforms the way consumers, value chains, providers can choose or not choose to cross-subsidize their business. If I were a lawyer, I would say this creates interesting regulatory issues. But the point here is, we've talked about Moore's Law. I want to talk about a byproduct of Moore's Law that everybody in this room has experienced. The line between an infrastructure and an app has been blurred. Mobile blurs the distinction between a feature and an app. What's the difference between a product and a service when it's digitized? It becomes arbitrary. I like to joke about provises and surducts, service-flavored products and product-flavored services. The big point that I'm seeking to make here is not that the technology vision here presented is incorrect or inaccurate, but it is going to be the innovative exploitation of market mechanisms and markets that will allow them to come into being. And that's going to be as much a function of the design of business models as technical innovation.
And policy. I think policy, business models, and innovation.
Absolutely.
This reminds me, if you want to get into some of the more obscure but really increasingly relevant areas of strategy literature, you see some stuff about what are called two-sided markets. And a classic example of a two-sided market is a bank that takes in money from depositors and loans money out to borrowers. Another one would be a magazine that has subscribers and advertisers. And the ability to arbitrage across those or make choices across those. Do you have a high subscription price, a low subscription price? What do you do? On which of your revenue streams do you put your most important cash registers? And how do you make that choice, is a really interesting strategy discipline that not too many people understand either in academic life or in the real world. And building up, and let alone in the world of policy that tries to say these are regulations. And this, Isabel, I saw you nodding a lot during this. Were you nodding in violent agreement, or should we?
She has a crick in her neck.
No. I think that he's absolutely right. The big innovation about Google is not only having astonishing products. The big innovation is how to do business out of it. They call it monetize, but I think that real clue, the real innovation was a different business model. And it's based on a terrific product, great. But the real good thing is make us think about making money in a different way when other things are given, is how to add value on top of what is in Google, that is everything.
Alta Vista seemed like a pretty good search algorithm at one point, too. Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned speed bumps on the way to a digitopia. Let me mention two possible speed bumps. One is privacy concerns. Before 1989, the possibility of Big Brother was real. The internet was a military weapon. It was used to fight a nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So before 1989, Big Brother was a real possibility. But after '89, the National Science Foundation gave away the internet for free. Now the problem is not Big Brother, the problem is Little Brother. Pesky neighbors, cyber scammers, criminals. That's a real problem, okay? So I think privacy concerns are going to be more important because for every innovation, you have people who want to, bleed that innovation dry for criminal gains. The second problem, I think, is not a problem at all.
Criminals are innovators too,
Yeah, that's the problem.
But yeah, what you're saying, but what you're talking about is in the utopian world, it's a frictionless market, except you have a huge cybersecurity unit, which adds friction. Yeah.
Right. And the second problem, as I see it, is, well, people talk about a digital divide. We'll have the digital-rati and we'll have the digital poor. That never materialized because even today, teenagers, young kids are on the internet. If you're not on the internet and you're a kid, you don't exist. You don't have a Facebook, you don't have a Twitter file, you don't exist as a child. The digital divide is not the problem because access is getting cheaper and cheaper. The problem is jobs because the economy is making a transition from commodity-based capital to intellectual capital. So there's pressure on the educational systems and not every nation is educating their people for this new economy. So the jobs are important.
Do you think too many people go to college?
No, I think too few people go to college.
I disagree.
But I think you've actually identified a business question which is how are you going to employ the person who used to get a pretty good living at a General Motors plant and who cannot get a pretty good living now? And I think that's a question. Peter seems to have an idea about where we might find jobs for these people.
So I'll give you an example. One of the things that we're working on right now as a next X Prize we announced in partnership with Qualcomm that we're developing is called the Tricorder X Prize. And it's going to be a device that's got lab-on-a-chip capability. You can cough on it, you can do a blood finger prick, you can speak to it and so forth, and it can diagnose you. So you're going to start to have a disruption in the entire medical industry. What happens when this device is better than any group of board-certified doctors? And then all of a sudden, this device as well in a village in Africa to a minimally trained individual makes them the village doctor.
Right.
You can take that one step further and you're going to start to have AI-enabled and technology-enabled devices that basically take people up the employment curve and make them professionals. Of course, the pressure now becomes what will happen to the medical profession or the legal profession. Now, I happen to think getting rid of the legal profession is a good idea, but that's my own personal opinion. So the question really is, you know, as we start to bring technology up, it's going to move a lot of people up and potentially out over the top. So it's creation of new jobs, but it's complete transformations of industries.
I agree completely with what Peter is saying in terms of technology-enabled, technology-driven, technology-facilitated economic growth and human capital employment. What I do not agree with, and I respectfully disagree with my university professor colleague, but certainly not my peer here, is that going to a university and getting a degree in sociology, even if you write really good essays, is not going to help your employer.
I agree. Let's let Isabel. Isabel has been dying to enter this debate, and let me make sure that she does.
I think that our real problem is consistency. We have reached a level of technology, and we have achieved a level of access to information, but we still have the same regulation. We have still the same admiration for large companies. You know, you have mentioned that only 52% of the largest companies in the world are Americans. You know, when the real revolution comes from the individual power, and we really will surpass this crisis with the power of many, with the real, it's not only the crowd wisdom that we can debate afterwards if you want, but it's also the power of small entrepreneurs, small companies, and we are still dealing with the same ways of education, first problem, same ways, and in that type of, or in that way, I agree with you that university perhaps is not, is enough at the level that we have today.
Maybe Instituto de Empresa,
yeah.
not other things.
And then also the same way of getting the money or getting the resources to go live, you know, and that lack of consistency is what are making us suffer. And that is what we really need to change. That is the next generation. We have to, as Google did, we have to find a new way of improving and taking advantage of all the capabilities that we have now for free.
So let me ask you a question.